This is lesson 40 in our study of Old Testament history. We're beginning in real earnest today the study of the divided kingdom. We saw last time how the kingdom was divided because of Solomon's apostasy into Israel on the north, 10 tribes, and Judah on the south, 2 tribes, the tribe of Benjamin and the tribe of Judah. Today I want us to look at the first 100 years of division, a very stirring time. There are 15 separate kings during this period, 6 in the southern nation of Judah and 9 in the northern nation of Israel. Let's look at each one of those kings. First of all, Rehoboam takes Solomon's throne at his death. I want you to read. I'm not going to be reading a lot of the text, but I'm going to tell you what text you need to read. You need to read 1 Kings 12, 1 to 24, to get an initial look at Rehoboam's kingship. Rehoboam takes the throne and has an ideal chance of putting down the strife and the trouble that had existed during Solomon's latter reign. The tribes of the north come to him, the 10 tribes of which will become Israel, come to Rehoboam and they say, "Your father taxed us too heavily. If you'll just relieve our burden, we will serve you as king." He has an ideal opportunity to be a good man of God. He asked for the older men, the wise counselors, to come and give him advice. And they listen to his dilemma and they say this: if you will relieve these people's burden today, they will serve you all of their life. All you have to do is this one single thing. He could even gradually raise taxes after that, I'm sure. But he said, if you'll just relieve them today, they'll serve you forever. He said, stay and I'll get further advice. Then he called for counsel from the young men, the men he had grown up with, his peers. He surrounded himself, rather than with the wisdom of the ages, he surrounded himself with his peers. Anytime a young ruler does that, the nation is in trouble. Rehoboam asked them, what should I do? And those young men said, relieve their burden? Say, you toughen their burden. You put on them a heavier load. You raise their taxes. And you tell them your little finger is going to be thicker than your father's loins. Says your father may have beaten them with whips, but you're going to chastise them with scorpions. You go tell them that. And they'll learn their lesson. They'll learn not to question your authority if you'll just come down hard on them. Rehoboam's ill-advised move was that he listened to the wisdom of the young. And wisdom there is in quote marks, the so-called wisdom of the young, rather than to the wisdom of the aged. And he went and he told these potential enemies, I will this day become your enemy. I will raise your taxes. I will make your burden heavier. The men of Israel says, to your tents, O Israel, what do we have any way to do with Judah? And Jeroboam immediately came out of the woodwork and became their leader and their ruler. And Jeroboam, the official from Solomon's court that the prophet Ahijah had said would get the northern nation, now is accepted by these 10 tribes as their ruler. And God will now begin his work to make these brothers enemies and divide these empires from each other so that he can have at least sometime a righteous seed in Judah. In 1 Kings chapter 12, beginning with verse 25 and going through verse 33, you have the story that I just mentioned a bit in our last lesson, and that's about Jeroboam and his golden calves. Be sure and read that paragraph. Chapter 12 of 1 Kings, 25 to 33. Jeroboam reasons this way: my people are going down to Judah for the feast days, and they're worshiping down in the city of Jerusalem in the temple. They'll begin to think, God's down in Judah. Now, God's not up here in Israel. We need to be loyal to Judah and not loyal to Jeroboam. And so Jeroboam thinks they will kill me and become loyal to Rehoboam because that's where their God is found, in the city of Jerusalem. He did exactly a wise, politically wise thing. It's ungodly. It's sin, but it's politically wise. Not all things that are worldly wise are godly correct. He says, I'll put 2 golden calves. I'll erect 2 places of worship. I'll put one up in Dan. That's at the waters of Merom, Lake Hula, in the extreme northern part of Israel. I will put one in Bethel. I'll put a golden calf at each places. And I'll say, here's where you need to worship. I'll make it easier for them. They don't have to go all the way down to Jerusalem. If they live in the northern part of my kingdom, then go to Dan. If they live in the southern part of my kingdom, then go to Bethel. He's practicing a religion of convenience and a religion that is opposed to God's revealed word. He puts a golden calf at each place. Rather than having a feast in the 7th month on the 15th day, he has a feast on the 8th month and the 15th day. Rather than using Levitical priests, he used priests of every tribe except the tribe of Levi. And he threatens punishment to any of his people that go to Jerusalem and does not go before these golden calves to worship. The text says this thing became a sin to Israel. 23 plus times. The book of 1st and 2nd Kings will say that a king failed not to walk in the sin of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, wherewith he made Israel to sin. Every single king of Israel will bow down to Jeroboam's golden calves. Now Ahab will add to Baal worship, but he'll add it. They will still bow down to Jeroboam's golden calf. From the very beginning, Israel is doomed as a nation. From the very beginning, they say, we're not the nation of God. And God has to recognize that decision. In 1 Kings chapter 13, God sends a man from Judah up to prophesy against Jeroboam's altar. Evidently, there's no one in Israel who he could send. So he sends a man all the way from Judah. He says, you go up and cry out against that altar. And said that a man by the name of Josiah one day will come and will destroy this idol and burn all of the remnant of Jeroboam's altar. One of these days, Josiah will do that. He says, you go straight up there, you tell the king that, you turn around, you come straight home. And you come home the same way you went up. But now he doesn't do that. He goes up and he prophesies against Jeroboam's altar that it will fall. And he starts back a different way. And an old prophet, that's why we sometimes call this prophet the young prophet. An old prophet from Israel follows the man and says, goes out and sees the man and says, God has told me to have you come to my house. He said, wait a minute, God's told me to come home without stopping. Yes, I know, but God has told me he wants you to eat on the way. So you come back to my house and eat, then I'll send you on your journey. He does that. He has violated God's word. He's not doing the will of God. He starts back toward Judah, and a lion kills him. And the old man hears about it and comes out to bury this prophet. And there's the man's donkey and the lion standing there together looking at the man's body. Wouldn't that indicate it is of God? What would a donkey normally do when a lion has killed his rider? He'd run, wouldn't he? And what would a lion normally do? Eat the man he's killed, wouldn't he? This is no ordinary thing. This is God's way of saying, when I give an assignment, I want that assignment fulfilled to the last letter. If this man's a faithful man of God, and this is just a temporary mistake, when he was killed, he went to be with God, and that's better by far. If he was a rebellious prophet, as Balaam was, then he went to his reward, and that's not altogether good. Jeroboam is ruling in Israel at this time, and we'll look at Jeroboam's reign in some detail later on. But Jeroboam not only has made this golden calf, he's committed all kinds of evil. His whole house, God sends a prophet to tell him that his whole house is going to have to be destroyed. That he, God, will sweep Jeroboam's house as a woman sweeps her house until it is clean, that nothing is there. It is as if it had dung in it. And she sweeps it until there's not even any smell of the dung. But Jeroboam has one good son, and that son becomes ill. And Jeroboam sends to Ahijah, the prophet, to find out if the boy will survive. And Ahijah says, go back and tell Jeroboam that boy will die. And the reason he'll die is he alone of Jeroboam's house will come to the grave in peace, because I found some good thing in him. One son of Jeroboam is good. The rest of Jeroboam's house is evil. That's in chapter 14 of 1 Kings, verses 1 to 20. In 1 Kings 14, verses 21 to 31, you have a summary of Rehoboam's reign. In Rehoboam's day, he allowed idolatry to exist even in the city of Jerusalem. And because of that, Shishak, the king of Israel, Egypt, came and invaded Judah and carried away all of the treasures of David and Solomon to Egypt. He warred, Rehoboam did, continually with Jeroboam. Win some, lose some. Finally he died and was buried. And Abijah, his son, began to reign over Judah in 1 Kings 15, verses 1 to 8. He was a wicked king, just like his father Rehoboam. He continually warred with Jeroboam, won temporary victories, but finally was defeated by Jeroboam. He captured, Abijah did, the cities of Bethel and the surrounding towns. He was a wicked man. When he died, he had 14 wives and 22 sons and 16 daughters. The man was evil politically, he was evil morally, he was evil maritally. When he died, a good king finally came to the throne of Judah. The man's name is Asa, and you read of that in 1 Kings 15 and in 1 Chronicles 14. He led a drastic reformation. He did away with all of the idolatry in the city of Jerusalem. He purged the temple. He set back up the true worship of God. Zerah, the Cushite or the Ethiopian, came to war against him, and Asa soundly defeated him. He blocked the king of Israel from building Ramah as a border blockade over in the eastern part, over across the Jordan. He was moral, he was upright, he was victorious in all the battles that he fought. Jeroboam dies, and Nadab, his son, reigns over Israel, but only for 2 years. And Baasha kills Nadab, ending the dynasty of Jeroboam. If you'll begin to count there, you'll find there are 9 separate dynasties in Israel, while there's one in Judah, the dynasty of David. But Baasha's killing Nadab ended Jeroboam's house reign over Israel. And Baasha began to reign over Israel. He killed all of Jeroboam's house. He killed every single child, man, woman, boy, girl. He killed the whole house of Nadab or of Jeroboam, wiped it away as one would wipe away dung until it all be gone. He so wanted a separation from Jeroboam's reign that he moved the castle, the palace, the capital, from Shechem to Tirzah. He bought that hill and he captured that hill and made it his capital city. He warred continually with Judah. That's with Asa. He never won a battle because Asa is a righteous king. And God has made a covenant that whenever his righteous people go out to war against their enemies, they will always win. His son Elah, he's a wicked man, Baasha. His son Elah comes to the throne, and Zimri kills him, and that ends the dynasty of Baasha. And really, this is a period sort of anarchy, isn't it? If you want to be king, what do you do? Kill the king and make yourself king. Zimri only reigned for 7 days. A week is all he reigned. He was a weak king. He reigned for 7 days and killed himself. Took his own life because Omri had surrounded his house and set it afire. Omri had a powerful reign over Israel in 1 Kings 16 and 17. Or actually, the latter part of 16. He had speedy revenge on Zimri, burned his house down, and Zimri killed himself. He had for a while a contestant to the throne named Tibni, but he went to battle with him and killed him and established himself as the ruler of Israel. He wanted to be separated from Baasha, and so he bought the hill of Samaria and moved the capital from Tirzah to Samaria, and it will remain in Samaria for the rest of Israel's history, which shows the power of this King Omri. He is the first king in Israel to be mentioned in Assyrian inscriptions. He is paying tribute to one of the kings of Assyria. His son was named Ahab, and Ahab was probably the foulest king that sat on Israel's throne. Matter of fact, one writer called him an evil toad that squatted on Israel's throne. He married Jezebel. the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. This is undoubtedly the most wicked woman that ever lived. She brought the Baal worship, as we've already said in the last lesson, a fertility rite. To finish this sacrifice, to really be religious, you have to commit fornication, either with the opposite sex or the same sex. She introduced this foul, attractive worship in Israel. So now they've got Jeroboam's calves and they've got Jezebel's bull. He warred with Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, and won. Because that's two wicked people fighting, and so just whoever's the strongest can win that battle. Neither one of them have the help of God. Whoever has the help of God wins. And if neither one have the help of God, then just whoever's the strongest will win. And Ahab this time is stronger than the strongest king of the strongest nation around him. He fought constantly, Ahab did, against Elijah's godly influence. God does not leave Ahab without testimony. Elijah comes to testify again and again of the wickedness of Ahab's house. He has to spend years away from home, Elijah does, in the widow's house, down by the riverside, because Ahab says, I will kill you this day. And God will preserve his prophet Elijah. Down by the brook Cherith, he has a raven bring him food, or ravens bring him food every day, and this brook Cherith gives him something to drink. When the brook went dry, he went to the widow of Zarnath's house, and she had just a little meal, and just a little oil, and just a little wine. He says, you just make it for me, and it'll never go out. And for the year that he was there, her little bit of flour made bread every day. Her little bit of oil, her little bit of wine lasted throughout all the time that Elijah was under her house. He constantly told Ahab of the wickedness he was doing and of God's decree to destroy his nation. And yet Ahab constantly resisted the word of Elijah, the great prophet of God. You need to read this section, starting in 1 Kings 16 and going through all the way through 1 Kings 22, and see the powerful testimony of this prophet of God named Elijah. Matter of fact, on one occasion, Elijah challenged all the prophets of Baal to meet him on the top of Mount Carmel. And there, with a mighty act of judgment, God showed that he was king, that he was the God, not just of Judah, but also of Israel. And the people promised that they served God, but of course they didn't. And that day, Elijah killed 450 prophets of Baal on one stone and prayed for rain. It hadn't rained for 2.5 years. And he prayed for rain. And God sent a small cloud that soon covered the sky. And the earth was replenished by the rain that came. And God was again proven to be God rather than Baal. But still, Ahab doesn't listen. Still, Jezebel does not listen. During this same period of time, Ahab looked at a vineyard next to his, belonging to a man named Naboth. It was his possession. It was his inheritance from his fathers, all the way from the day that Joshua led them across the Jordan River. And Ahab offered Naboth all of the money he wanted for that vineyard, and Naboth couldn't sell it because it was his inheritance from God. And finally, Jezebel had Naboth killed, and Ahab took his vineyard. And God said, I've seen what you've done. I've seen what Jezebel has done. You will cease to be king, and the dogs will eat Jezebel's flesh. And that happened. That happened. We'll see that as we study Jehu later. Ahab made an alliance with Jehoshaphat. That's good for Ahab, but it's bad for Jehoshaphat. When the righteous make an alliance with the wicked, we're always in trouble. They want to fight against Ramoth Gilead. I don't know if that's the nation of Gilead or whether that's the nation of Ammon. But Ahab and Jehoshaphat are at a feast, and all 400 prophets that were left after the slaughter of the 450 Baal prophets, there's only 400 Asherah prophets left. They prophesy with one voice, go up to Ramoth Gilead and prosper. Jehoshaphat knows, this is 1 Kings chapter 22. Jehoshaphat knows in the wicked nation of Israel there cannot be 400 true preachers, true prophets of God. So he says, is there not here one prophet of Jehovah besides, that he can prophesy about what will happen? And Ahab says, there's yet one man, Micaiah, son of Imlah, but my soul hates him. That's the greatest compliment ever paid to a prophet. When the wickedest man in the world, the most wicked person in the world, hates you, you're all right. Micaiah is brought out of prison and prophesies that this day Ahab will die. Ahab doesn't want to die. So when they go to battle, he disguises himself as an ordinary soldier and lets Jehoshaphat wear the king's robe. The king of Syria has said, don't kill anybody but Ahab. And so here's a man with an arrow in his bow. He sees a man in kingly robe. He thinks it's Ahab. He draws his arrow, draws his bow to shoot the arrow, and Jehoshaphat cries out, wait a minute, I'm not Ahab. And so I'm Jehoshaphat. He had a bow and the arrow. He just shot it at a venture, just shot it in the air, and it struck Ahab the only place it could have killed him, in the crease between the armor. And Ahab turned aside and died in the field of Naboth, and dogs licked his blood there. Payday had come for Ahab, who had brought the wickedness of Baal into Israel. We've introduced Jehoshaphat. During this time, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, reigns. He is a good king, a man of God. He continues Asa's reforms. He got all of the worship of all of the idols out of Judah. He fortified the entire nation, made it again the strong nation it was at Solomon's death. He defeated and subjugated all of his enemies, the Philistines, the Arabians, the Edomites. But then he made that ill-advised alliance with Ahab. It will so affect his house that his son will marry Athaliah, the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. Ahaziah is king of Israel at the death of Ahab, and he's just like his father Ahab, a wicked man. He falls through the lattice in his house and is injured. He's sent to Ekron to inquire of the god Beelzebub to see whether or not he would recover. Elijah meets the messenger and says, go back and tell Ahaziah he will die. And that's exactly what occurred. Jehoram then began to reign over Israel. That's not Ahaziah's son. That's Ahab's second son. He recovered Moab. He fought against Elijah and Elisha's godly influence. He would not listen to the old prophet or to the prophet that succeeded him. And he will die. And one day, the same day that Ahaziah, the king of Judah, will die, on the field of battle against Jehu, the fast chariot driver. Jehoram reigned at this time over Judah. He's the son of Jehoshaphat. And he marries the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, Athaliah. And because of that, begins to bow down and worship the Baal gods. And he will be defeated by strangers, not by Israel, not by brothers, but by strangers. His brother, his son, Ahaziah, comes to the throne. And he will meet, we'll study it next time, on the same day that Jehoram of Israel dies, he will be killed by Jehu, the fast chariot driver. These are not good times. As we end this period of division, Israel, of course, has always been wicked, and Judah is being influenced by the same Baal worship that pervaded Israel. God must take a hand. What God did was twofold. First of all, he sent Elijah and Elisha to speak to the nation of Israel, the king of Israel, about his wickedness. But then what God did mainly was raise up a fast chariot driver, a great warrior named Jehu. And Jehu in one single day is going to slay both the king of Israel and the king of Judah. And he will destroy the Baal worship altogether from Israel, and give both nations a chance to start all over again, anew. And it'll take a while, but this will be a benefit, finally, to Judah. It will benefit Israel none at all. We'll pick up the history later on in our next lesson. But let's think about a prophet. I'd like to spend a long time on Elijah and Elisha, but you'll just have to read that on your own. What I want to do is we'll come to one of the writing prophets of the Old Testament, fit him in historically. During the reign of Jehoram, the king of Judah, foreigners came from Arabia and from Egypt and from Ethiopia and sacked the temple took away the temple treasures and carried away a lot of the people and defeated the nation of Judah. And during that time, Edom, who could have come to their help and was a brother and shouldn't, did not. So God raised up the prophet Obadiah. And Obadiah spoke to Judah, but he spoke of the nation of Edom. Edom, he said, was convicted for two reasons. First of all, their pride, but primarily they stood on the other side when their brother was in need. They stood aloof. They did not come to their brother's aid. Their violence was their silence. When a brother is in trouble, where should all of his brothers be? Around him, protecting him, and providing him their strength. But in wicked Judah, that can't happen, because they're no longer worshiping God, they're bowing to the Baal. But let's you and I learn that lesson. Let's be brothers in Christ. And when we're criticized, when we hear another brother criticized, let's arise to his defense. When the brother's in trouble, let's come to his aid. When the brother's in need, let's meet his needs. Let's practice one another religion and not be like Edom, condemned because of their neutrality. We'll continue the historical study next time.